to Claire and Milo Talk About Books, Episode 3, The Rise of Cozy Fantasy. So today we're going to be talking about...
Cozy fantasy,
Cozy
of course.
fantasy. Yeah.
The genre on everyone's minds. It's for the last couple of years.
Yeah. So we're going to tell you a little bit about cozy fantasy, what it is, why we think you should read it, and talk about some really excellent examples of this genre that we think that you should check out.
Yeah, as a cozy fantasy newbie myself, I am going to be learning a little bit more and getting some recommendations. I've already seen some of these and they're pretty killers, so getting some recommendations for where to get started if you haven't read widely in this subgenre before. And most importantly, this episode will feature...
Dun, dun, dun. So, Travis Baldree, the author of Legends and Lattes. So we have an interview later in this episode that we're going to share with you. So we're quite excited.
Yeah, the man, the myth, the legend. He very kindly made some time in his very busy schedule to talk to us. So we're grateful for that, and we're excited to share it with you.
Yeah. All right. Let's get started.
Yes.
So cozy fantasy. So cozy is a new term for, it's a new marketing term for books that have been around for a really long time, and it just kind of gives a way for the industry to introduce this type of book to people that maybe would not have picked it up before. So I would say cozy fantasy is kind of defined as being low stakes, character driven fantasy in which nothing really big or epic in scope happens, but it's generally about family or found family, community. It's characterized by being hopeful. And most importantly for me is that if something is cozy fantasy, it's kind of the metaphorical equivalent of sitting down with a cup of tea, getting a big hug. It's all about how you feel, right?
Yeah.
And it seems that in the last couple of years, last 2 or 3 years especially, we're seeing a lot of books being marketed as cozy fantasy coming into our stores. Tons of books now have got... that I see coming in are like, for fans of Legends and Lattes, for fans of Travis Baldree.
It's really taken off
It's
in the
really
last couple of years.
which is really exciting because it's a genre that I've loved for a long time, years and years. So I thought I would talk a little bit about some of my own experiences with what I would consider what we now call cozy fantasy and why I think people have embraced them so much. So this is actually a copy of Ella Enchanted.
I'm going to tell you right now, this is like one of my favorite books of all time. I got this at the Scholastic Book Fair as like a kid.
Me too.
Is this your actual Scholastic Book Fair copy?
So you can see that this is a very worn out copy of my original Scholastic Book Fair edition, and you can see that little Claire wrote her name here at the top.
How old were you, would you say?
9 or 10 probably.
That's delightful.
So this is actually the first Scholastic printing from the year 1988.
Yes.
And I love this book so much. So my husband and I moved to Seattle about 5 years ago for his work. And we were leaving behind our friends and family, moving to a new country, starting a big new job. And when we moved here, I specifically packed up my comfort books. And this is one of my comfort books. And at that time, this was before the pandemic. Nobody had any idea what was going to be in store for us. And I spent the pandemic and the first year or two of my life in Seattle reading media that I found comforting. And a lot of these books that are written for children or that were written for young adults in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and earlier are now kind of characterized as having what we would consider to be cozy fantasy vibes. They are books, they're character-driven books, the stakes aren't too high, the problems aren't insurmountable, and they're really about the ambiance, they're about the characters. So Ella Enchanted is a fantastic book. Actually, I sell a lot of copies of this at my store because I love it. I love it so much. But
it's so great.
It's
if you've
great.
seen the movie with the fabulous Anne Hathaway, but you haven't read the book Ella Enchanted, it's so worth reading. It's a little bit different than the movie. It's not a musical. But it's fantastic. All of her like fairy tale retellings are kind of the only fairy tale retellings. Now this might be a little controversial, fellas. Really the only fairy tale retellings I like have been hers.
Hers, yeah.
That's my bar.
That's fair. And another author that has sort of become famous for kind of cozy fantasy is, so this is Diana Wynne Jones. So this is a paperback edition of The Lives of Christopher Chant. And this is another author I discovered when I was a child that I absolutely have carried with me into adulthood. And so these are actually paperback editions I bought when we moved to Seattle, because I wanted to have just kind of paperback copies. And so Diana Wynne Jones is considered by a lot of people to be the godmother of children's fantasy. And she is most famous for Howl's Moving Castle, which was adapted by Studio Ghibli, I think in 2006, 2005 or 2006. Yeah. And that really, she had been writing for decades before that, but that really put her in the international consciousness. Mm-hmm. And I would still say that Howl's Moving Castle is probably her most famous work. And it has all the hallmarks of being cozy fantasy. So you've got kind of lower stakes, character-driven fantasy, real ambiance. The characters are really interesting. Had a lot to do with found family.
Well, I like what you said. There might be issues and stakes, but the problems aren't insurmountable.
Yeah, they're not insurmountable.
Things we know our heroes will be able to face and succeed.
Yeah, and actually so the Folio Society, and I'll link these, has made some really, really beautiful editions of anyone who's interested in Howl's Moving Castle or any of Diana's other works. And they're really, really, really gorgeously illustrated. They have beautiful illustrations. They're just really incredible editions of some very, very beloved books. And I'm really glad that they're not. So they did the Howl's Moving Castle trilogy, but they're also doing her other works, which I love and I think people should read more of. So I'll link those. I'll link those as well. So this is Legends and Lattes. It's by Travis Baldree. So this is actually the original self-published edition that came out in, I think it was February of 2022. Mm-hmm. So when this book came out, it was originally indie published. So Travis published it himself. He commissioned all the artwork. He did everything himself. He's a professional audiobook narrator. And this is a book about a orc barbarian named Viv. And she decides that she wants to hang up her sword, she's finished adventuring, and she wants to open a coffee shop. It's sort of set in a D&D sort of inspired setting, but anyone can read it. You don't have to know anything about D&D to enjoy it. And it's a story about reinvention and, being in your 40s and wanting to do something different. And one of the main themes of the book is that things don't have to stay as what they started out as.
Yeah.
And it's just such a beautiful message. It's a beautiful story. And so this book, I was originally made aware of it because I have a bookseller friend named Kel, who really has her finger on the pulse. And I got a message from Kel, and Kel was like, you have to read this book. You have to read it. So I actually, if you can see here that Travis signed it for me at an event, and it says OG, because this is the original self-published edition. And very quickly, because of word of mouth, bookseller word of mouth, this book became really, really huge. And I think we've actually talked about in another video, we were able to organize Travis's book launch when they re-released Legends and Lattes through Tor Books.
Claire was brilliant. That book was coming out, and I had only been event planning for a little while, and Claire was like, "You gotta get this one," and I was like, "Oh, okay,
we did it.
Okay,
yeah, we did it."
And then it really started something.
Yeah, that was a great event. It was really, really good,
and people were jazzed. People were excited.
Yeah, that event was really fun. It was really great.
And that book ended up, being so central now to this.
Yeah, it really kicked off a big, it showed the publishing industry that there was a lot of interest in books like this, high fantasy, low stakes, I think is how it was originally marketed. And after Legends and Lattes, there was an avalanche of books that came after, and especially stuff, a lot of authors in their acknowledgments in their books directly credit Travis Baldree with being an inspiration for them and showing that like people wanted to read this and people were excited about it. This is Can't Spell Treason Without Tea by Rebecca Thorne. And we were carrying the indie edition of this before it also got picked up.
Nice.
Yeah, this is Bramble. And I think that they actually say that they were inspired by Travis. And yeah, I'd be lying if I said this book wasn't directly inspired by Travis Baldree's incredible cozy fantasy, legends, and lattes. Travis, thank you for all your incredible kindness and encouragement, and thank you for giving the cozy fantasy genre a name so authors like me can rally behind it. And I think that's so huge. And we actually talked with Travis about that, which is that he really gave a name and he really pushed this work, and it really became so huge. And he has been so encouraging for other authors who came later. So Can't Spell Treason Without Tea is fantastic. It actually got a gorgeous little traditional release with this kind of green sprayed edges.
Love a sprayed edge.
We love a sprayed edge. So this book is a cozy fantasy steeped with love. So this is pretty great. And let me see if, oh yeah, we have it here. Here's another. So these are some of my personal favorites, and I'm so excited about this.
Even the cover, I'm mesmerized by the cover on this book.
I cannot wait. So I'm going to review this book as well. But this is The Teller of Small Fortunes. So these are arcs. This is an arc. This book is not coming out until November the 5th, 2024. So it is going to be in the fall. You are going to be able to buy this book. You can pre-order it. And so a lot of times arcs, especially for booksellers, will come with these little papers where they kind of tell you a little bit about it. Sometimes the publicist will write a little blurb talking about the book, why they think booksellers should be excited about it. And so something that I think is really, really, really special about this book in particular, so this is The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong. And I really identified with this book because something that I realized while she was writing it was, so she turned to cozy fantasy as an escape from reality during a difficult time in her life. Like most of us, you know, she wanted to, you know, read and write cozy fantasy because of challenges in her life. So she was reading herself a lot of cozy fantasy at that time. And so she was saying that she was reading any book that was magical, comforting, and heartfelt. And when she began to run out of them, she decided to write her own cozy fantasy. And this book is beautiful. I really resonated with this book personally because I think now that there's kind of a boom for cozy fantasy, there is a lot of things are being marketed with this label. But I think this one is really special because my own father was in the midst of a long and grueling terminal cancer battle, which he eventually passed away from. And I found so much comfort reading this book because I knew that it was written from a place that I felt like I was at the time as well. So I'm so excited to share more information about this book with you. And yeah, so these are some really great examples of the genre. Can't Spell Treason Without Tea. This one, Teller of Small Fortunes, is going to be coming out in November. And yeah.
It's really meaningful, to have things that are kind of like written almost specifically to kind of help readers get through times that feel stressful or tough.
I think so.
With like a dose of hope, you know?
Well, that's just it. And I think too, especially about cozy fantasy and kind of this genre in particular, is that every book that we read it because we want an experience, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that there's something really meaningful to me, and something especially as a reader and a bookseller that I really resonated with, is that I think that just the experience of wanting to participate in this, you have this sort of found family, you sort of have these, people going through, grief and uncertainty, and just this idea that life is hopeful and things are hopeful. And it's just, I don't know, I think it's just a way to soothe your soul a little bit. And I think that's what these books are really good for, is kind of providing that experience that reminds you that even though, you know, we may be facing, you know, unprecedented economic challenges and, you know, global pandemics and, you know, everything that we have going on in the world today, you know, war and genocide and like every time you turn on the news.
Don't forget climate change.
Climate change. I feel like we are living during very difficult times. And I think that these types of books are really an antidote to that, especially for me. I feel like I sell a ton of cozy fantasy work.
Oh, it's so needed. It's it's a balm to the soul. And I think I really like the way that this genre has moved into being a little more marketable to adults because I don't know, you move to adulthood, all of a sudden, you know, a lot of the media that is marketed to you is just like full of like intense problems
and sometimes
extreme,
you want those.
Philosophical confusion. And sometimes you do want those. I want that all the time. I want that a lot. But there's times too where you need to like. You need a break from that sometimes.
From your soul,
you know? You gotta get a palate cleanser.
Agreed.
Or maybe you're going through something and it doesn't feel so good to read about people doing stuff with like intense high stakes and like personal tragedy going on all the time.
It's hard. It's stressful. Yeah. I mean, I love grimdark fantasy. I love horror. Like, I love those genres. But I think that there's just something so healing about reading books like this.
Yeah, you should read both. That's the thing. You read both and you get that like, oh God, at least that's not me. And then you get the, oh, that could be me.
Yeah.
You know?
I think
it's
so.
It's like 1-2 punch that I think is very psychologically comforting.
Yeah. So I think if I was going to recommend somewhere for you to start with cozy fantasy, I think Legends and Lattes is a really fantastic place to start. Travis is very humble, but he is an incredible author. And actually, if you continue watching the rest of this video, you'll see that he has a fantastic interview where he talks all about his process, his thoughts about cozy fantasy, his thoughts about writing and characterization. So he's incredible. So please do take, even if you're going to skip through this, definitely take the time to watch that. So Legends and Lattes is a good place to start. I think I would also highly recommend Diana Wynne Jones. Also, Howl's Moving Castle is her most famous, but I actually prefer her other works, so the Crestomonsi books, and the first one of those is Charmed Life. So I'll have some information about that book, so we'll link some information as well about that one. And then I think if you're looking for something to pre-order, I would definitely recommend The Teller of Small Fortunes. I think this is probably my favorite cozy fantasy I've read since Legends and Lattes. For me, it's one of the few things that's really, really lived up to that high bar that I think Travis has set for these stories. But yeah, I think Julie is going to have an incredible career. I think this is really I think this book is going to be really huge.
That's awesome. Yeah. So a lot of these are about hot drinks.
Yes! Speaking of hot drinks, I'm so thirsty. Yeah, so I think that there's just something, and I think that goes back to the ambiance, the vibe, and I think that tea and coffee and coming together and sitting at a table and having conversations, which is what we do, is really important for human connection. I think that hot drinks are a way to connect with people. And so a lot of people don't know this, but I used to be a part owner in a coffee shop. Before I moved to Seattle with my husband, we ran a business. It was a coffee shop and a board game store, and it really was a place of connection. And we made a lot of really good friends doing that. I had a lot of incredible experiences, and I really think that, hot drinks and coffee are places that people can come to, to gather and to be. And I think that these books, really capture the feeling of that human connection and those places that you can gather. So I think that whenever authors put out these books, I feel like they're asking you to take a metaphorical seat at the table and enjoy a hot drink, and you get that vibe. It's really special.
First of all, very excited now. I'm jazzed.
Yeah.
Second of all, highly recommend the audiobook of Legends and Lattes.
Yes.
He narrates it himself, and it's fantastic. You get to really...
Yeah.
There's something I think different when authors read their own audiobooks. I think it really adds something, and since he's a pro, it's on another level.
It's really good.
Yeah, it's really good.
All right. Well, let's hand it over to Travis Baldree.
Huzzah! Let's go!
Let's go. Before we get to the interview with Travis, I just wanted to bring to your attention that Subterranean Press, a specialty publisher that publishes luxurious specialty limited editions and groundbreaking original works in the science fiction, fantasy, and horror genres, also offers free ebooks. And they currently have Travis Baldree's Goblins and Greatcoats. We do talk about it in this interview. You will want to read it. Some of the characters from this book are going to feature in Travis's upcoming books, so you can find Subterranean Press at www.subterraneanpress.com. If you just click on free ebooks, it will take you there. So if we click on free ebooks, here we go. And you can see that they not only have Goblins and Greatcoats by Travis Baldree, but they also have lots of other authors. So these are all books that have been commissioned by Subterranean Press. So all you have to do is click on the book that you're interested in. You can go ahead and add it to cart, and you have to check out, but it won't charge you any money, and you get to read a really charming little story written by Travis Baldree about some of his amazing characters. And yeah, so you can get a sneak peek at some of the upcoming publishing projects he's going to be doing, and also read about a few characters that are going to be featured later on in some of his work. So definitely check out Subterranean Press, www.subterraneanpress.com, and download Goblins and Greatcoats. Oh my gosh. Hi, how are you? Welcome.
Hi, how are you? I'm just fine.
Good. Thank you so much for taking some time to chat with us today about your work and about everything.
Yeah. We are looking forward to it. We have worked together before a couple of times, doing different kind of events and such. And it's great to see you again and talk about
Great to see you too.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I promise to try my best to be coherent. I do have a whole coffee in me, so
I'm not good.
Is it a latte?
I don't think I think it's a mezzo.
Ooh.
It doesn't have quite the amount of milk that you would require for a latte, but
Cool. I was gonna
I don't know why I'm splitting hairs about this.
No, I'm enjoying it.
I used to own a coffee shop, so I feel like it's appropriate. You should split hairs.
I'm an avid coffee enjoyer. I tried to get a coffee at the donut shop today, and then every single person on Earth was there because PAX is here. And I forgot.
Oh gosh, the PAX is this weekend?
Yeah,
It's this
it's
weekend.
happening.
Oh my.
It is so with us right now.
It is
And there were like
hard.
1,000 like video gaming men inside of the donut shop, and I was like, whoa.
I bet that's right. I remember working PAX. This is just
It makes me jealous. I'm
distant
like, I was
past.
part of it, but kind of not though.
So I think I'll go ahead and start with the first question, which is 2 years into your career as having been both a self-published and traditionally published author, what is your perspective on things?
Okay, well, that's a big question. It's a broad question. I'm glad I did it. I'm grateful for the experience. I'm fully cognizant of the fact that the position that I'm in is largely due to a confluence of events that I had nothing to do with. So I'm delighted to be along for the ride. I am surprised at which parts of it I have found the most rewarding, and I am in the middle of writing more. So I guess I'm still doing it.
Can you talk a little bit about any projects or not really?
I'm working on a third book right now. I'm a little over the third of the way through. I'm behind deadline, but it's been a busy year.
I
Um,
Yeah. It's fundamentally part of it, I think. to be
Yeah.
honest.
Is it
um,
about, is it about Zill?
she's in it.
She's in it. Yes. Okay.
She's in it. It's actually Fern's book. So if you've read Bookshops and Bone Dust, it's actually Fern's book.
I love
Oh
it.
my gosh. That's
fantastic.
incredible. I love Zill so much.
And I read
Well,
that
she figures
so-
in a great deal. She figures in a great deal.
Wonderful.
I wanted her to have her own book. That was the original plan for her, and that's why the short Goblins and Greatcoats exists, but it's actually hard for her to be the main character of a book because
Charm.
part of her charm is that you have no idea what the heck is going on. And so you really need a straight woman or straight man to function, to make that function
Yeah.
for a long period of time. So yeah, she's a secondary character in this book, but she's definitely important. She drives it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I love that she comes out of nowhere. She flexes on everyone. She makes people feel weird.
I have my own red-haired goblin.
That's me. I'm of this podcast.
So I'm really fine.
It's a high bar to try to meet there. I'm curious about what you said that you've been surprised by the things that have been rewarding.
So I mean, the most surprising thing has just been you end up putting a lot of yourself unwittingly and wittingly into whatever it is that you're writing. It's just experiences that you understand and that, resonate enough with you that they can keep a story functional. And when other people recognize those things from their own experience and let you know about it, it's this kind of really profoundly connective experience that I did not expect would be as profound as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's hard to articulate how rewarding it is because I hadn't experienced it before. So I don't really have anything else to relate it to, but it's, yeah, unexpectedly great.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So we've been talking a little bit about what has come to be known as cozy fantasy, cozy. And one of the things that you said was a major inspiration when writing Legends and Lattes was your desire for relatability. And you also talk about like trying not to be too ambitious when it's just setting yourself up for failure.
Mm-hmm.
So do you mind talking a little bit about just kind of like grounding that story in that relatability?
Yeah. So there's kind of two questions there. One about, the scope of your story and not letting the scope get away from you, which I think can apply to any genre, period. Yeah. I think we have a tendency when we write, or at least I had a tendency when I write to this, like, this is my one shot. I got to put everything in here. It needs to be the biggest, the best. It's got to be the great American novel because I'm probably never going to do this again. And if I don't do it, it's not worth my time and everyone will laugh. And I think that just sets you up, or at least it certainly set me up for failure. Because a simple idea can be a worthy idea. It just doesn't have to have everything to function as a story or to allow other people to relate to it.
Yeah.
And if you can set your sights lower in terms of scope, you can actually finish the darn thing, which is, kind of important.
Yes, absolutely.
The lure of the story that comprises every topic everyone's ever heard of is strong, but
you got to cover the whole human experience, and the idea that that your ideas have to be so clever. Like, I got to come up with this great twist. I've got to come up with this perfect idea, or nobody's going to be interested in it. But ideas are not that important, actually. I don't think, unless you're literally writing a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
And the idea is that important. There are cases where it is, and maybe a clever solution to a mystery. That's part of the idea. There's certainly books that benefit from their ideas and that makes them what they are. But I don't think most books are. And I think most ideas have been had. So what you're bringing to it is your experience, your personal experience that somebody else is going to connect to or not.
Yeah.
And almost more importantly, the characters that you write that embody that experience. People really care about characters for the most part. Again, Twilight Zone notwithstanding, certain kinds of stories notwithstanding, mostly we relate to characters. We're like, this character is just like my favorite character. I want to read about them. I care about them and their relationships to other characters. And that doesn't have anything to do with the idea or the plot or any of the rest of that, for the most part. Exceptions to every rule, but yeah. And then I guess the other half of it, you were talking about cozy and reduction of scale in terms of that, and just cozy in general. But maybe you want to reframe that question so I don't just wander off into the wilderness.
Wander? No, please. If you want to wander, you can. We can.
Wandering is my passion.
Yeah.
But I guess there's just been such a delightful percolation of like cozy literature. And
well, cozy seems to be a big thing right now. Games, television.
I think there's been kind of a sharpening of focus on it. I think it's definitely existed for a long time. I mean, The Hobbit is about a guy who wants to stay home and eat,
Yeah,
and
that's
the dragon dies off screen, and there's
Yeah.
lots of songs, and all of the food is described in loving detail. Every Studio Ghibli movie ever made, okay, not all of them, but most of them are, let's face it, basically cozy fantasy.
Mm.
Diana Wynne Jones,
Hey,
a
hey.
lot of YA fiction is cozy fantasy.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's just always existed. And there's been a lot of cozy games. I mean, you've got Stardew Valley, you've got, Harvest Moon. Plenty of this stuff has existed in some form or another. I think mostly the label's just been put onto it.
Yeah.
And in the last 5 years,
Mhm.
I think have specifically been, um, in terms of the world at large,
Yeah.
a a series of events that have made people want things that are comforting. And so it's sharpened our focus on those things more than anything else, I think.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. That is what we have discussed.
that's true. Claire genuinely was talking about Diana Wynne Jones.
Yeah, she is my one of my favorite authors.
Yeah.
So my husband and I moved to Seattle 5 years ago, and I brought all those books with me. Diana Wynne Jones, I had Ella Enchanted, which was one of my favorite childhood books.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff for that reason, because it's sort of that comfort media, right?
Mhm.
And I think that just, the global pandemic and people's circumstances have really, yeah, that we don't want big stakes anymore, right? You want to read about things that are comforting,
Yeah, at least you
right?
need to balance out like the
Yeah.
stuff that you're
Well,
perceiving.
and just the increasing struggle to have what's like termed like a normal, comfortable life. Like owning a house is like escapist fantasy, right? For most people.
Genuinely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So when your circumstances are such that just normality is escapist fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then like owning a business and having a stable life is
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
what
it's a
yeah.
delicious escape.
Yeah. It's wonderful. Finding friends in your 40s. This
Yeah.
is amazing.
Absolutely. Something else that we were chatting about is that a lot of authors have cited you specifically and your work as inspiration for their own. And I think part of that is just that people reading, people reading this book, Legends and Lattes, has really inspired them to be like, oh, I can write this for adults,
Yeah.
right? And I just wanted to know, like, yeah, like when you published your first novel, did you have any intuition that you would have such an outsized influence?
No, 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 no. And I mean, I really do think it's just a matter of right place, right time,
Yeah,
and that the book is uniquely easy to communicate to people as cozy fantasy.
Mm.
yeah,
I think you look at the cover, you look at the title, read the blurb. It's very obvious. It's very straightforward. You don't have to like explain at length why this is what it is. So it's just very easy to hold up and say, "Oh, well, it's like this," which is valuable,
yeah,
um, but certainly wasn't premeditated, and certainly wasn't something I expected.
yeah,
Like it could have been anyone else, and that if it had been 2 years either direction, it wouldn't have mattered. So
yeah. How serendipitous. That's
It's
so interesting.
it is. We're seeing a lot of advanced reader copies enter our circulation where in the letter they're like for fans of Legends and
Lo-
Lattes,
Yeah, for fans of Travis
which is
Baldree. Yeah,
exciting, which
it
is
is
cool to
exciting.
see.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And every time I see it, I'm like, hello, yay. Another thing I wanted to talk about is I'm a huge champion of indie authors. In my bookstore, I try and bring in as many indie titles as I can because I think they're just doing some really unique and interesting things. And it seems to me that people who publish indie tend to have more creative freedom, at least at the beginning, than more traditionally published authors who don't always get as much say in marketing. And I just wanted to know if you thought your debut would have been different if you had traditionally published like right out the gate.
I mean, I'm sure it would have for a couple of reasons. I think it's fair to say that if I had decided to go trad pub and went out on submission and had to get an agent first and then prove that anybody would care about the book, that would have been a longer road, not to mention just publication times.
Yeah.
It would have gone into the system. It might have gotten to taken a year to be picked up, and then it might take a year or 2 years to be published. And by that time, maybe we've all moved on. Maybe it doesn't matter. So
Right.
there's a certain amount of strike while the iron is hot. Just being responsive to what people might want at a given period in time that I think is important that wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Um, uh, I think that definitely indie authors can be, I don't know if it's so much creative freedom or it's just the immediacy of the creative freedom, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can do what I want to do right now. I don't have to prove it to anybody, and I can do it, and it will sink or float on its own merit.
Yeah.
Um, when I think of if I were to go back in time, I would still do indie
Mhm.
as my first publication, and if I ever felt like there was going to be any resistance, I would just go indie because I know way more successful indie authors than I do successful traditionally published authors financially in
Mhm.
terms of units sold and money and flexibility and control of their own destiny. I know way more financially solvent indies
That's super interesting.
Yeah.
because they can figure out what works and they can exploit it in a really rapid way. And there's a certain amount they to be successful as an indie author. I think you need to do more than just write. I think you need to care about your business and you need to care about
Mhm.
your cover and you need to care about your blurb and you need to be responsible for these things in a way that a lot of people don't want to be responsible. I know a lot of authors are like, I don't want to mess with that stuff. I just want to write in my book and have it
I'm
go.
not a graphic
That's
designer.
fine if you want to, great, but um, the ability to be able to devote a little bit of energy to some of the marketability of your book and the cover of your book and the editorial on your book and the positioning of your book. They're not rocket science. They're things that you can learn to do. And if you don't shy away from them, they give you a lot more surface area of control for the success of your book.
Yeah.
Um, I'm interested in that kind of stuff. So to each their own. If you don't want to do it, cool. But if you do, being indie gives you a lot of ability to uh, invest in and control your own success in a way that you otherwise wouldn't have.
That makes sense. I think we've been looking at even just covers of indie books in the cozy fantasy space mostly, and getting to see the like level of care
Yeah.
people put oftentimes into the design of their book and like how you can there's like very personal elements to it. I kind of
Mm-hmm.
have a question related to that.
Mm-hmm.
The art in your book I feel like has become quite iconic,
Yes.
and it's wonderful. It evokes the themes immediately. I will tell you I'm obsessed with the art of pot roast from bookshops.
Yeah.
I still have my sticker.
Yeah, the greatest. Who is your artist and what has that like relationship been like?
Carson Lowmiller is the artist. He goes by Emberwick on Twitter and Instagram and what have you. And he was fabulous. So I have, after working in games for decades and commissioning lots of art, I have lots of opinions on how you commission art and the
Yeah.
process that you should go through for that. So I was very particular about it. I knew
Mhm.
exactly what I wanted. And I know you've read the Medium article, so I wrote up the whole process for
Yeah.
how I produced the artwork. Um, I think some of it is just intuition for like what's going to represent my book well, because commissioning art, I mean, it is a skill. That's why you have art directors, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's not something that anybody can just do with no experience or no investment of time, but you can do it and you can learn to do it. Um, but ultimately, getting an artist that you work well with is about finding somebody, I think, who is already doing mostly what you want done. And
Oh.
I think one mistake that a lot of people make when they're commissioning artwork is they just look for a good artist that isn't necessarily doing what they want. Like, I love their artwork. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. They're an incredibly talented individual that is amazing skill, but maybe they're not doing what I want. Like, if you find the best landscape painter in the world and you ask them to paint your character artwork, that's not the right fit. I mean, obviously that's a ridiculous example, but
No, yeah. It makes
for Legends and Lattes, I found someone who did a lot of creature and humanoid artwork that was clearly fantasy, that had a very kind of painterly style, that had a lot of focus on the faces, had very expressive faces,
Yeah.
that treated female characters in a certain way that wasn't too overly sexualized. Because what I wanted to do was not have to spend a lot of time saying, hey, here's all the things that you love to do in art. Please don't do those.
Yeah.
Instead, do this other thing that I would like you to do. Because
Yeah.
that's a terrible way to start
Hmm.
It's a terrible way to start your art commission.
Oh, I'm sorry, my cat has been a menace. I've been watching her
If you've been
whole
hearing any
interview.
funky noise in the
She's
background,
on the
I'm
counter.
not. Noise
My
filtering is
husband,
really taking care of you.
he's back there trying to distract her,
my,
actually, from rampaging through the house.
Just
Right?
waiting for books to start falling off the shelves behind you.
here she
It
is.
could happen. I'm going to be completely honest with you. She's a little whirlwind of danger. Absolutely.
My poor husband has been chasing her around the house.
It's happening right now. I finished Goblins and Greatcoats last night. I'd love to talk about Zill. I'm obsessed with
We
her.
love her. Last year's obsession was pot roast,
And now it's Zill.
and now we've upgraded.
Yeah.
Are we gonna get Zill stickers at some point?
I think this is highly likely. I have some artwork and I
Oh,
gotta
on
start
the merch.
getting the cover done. So yeah, there will definitely be Zill stickers, I'm sure.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's amazing.
Yeah, anyone who hasn't read that should definitely go out and do so because it was completely delightful.
So Goblins and Greatcoats is more or less, so the second book, what eventually became Bookshops and Bone Dust, was supposed to be a cozy fantasy mystery. That was the whole point. It was going to be like Fantasy Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah.
Many of the characters that were in it ended up in Bookshops and Bone Dust.
Yeah.
Zelia Greatsprider, who was the author in Bookshops and Bone Dust, was actually going to be the detective, and Pot Roast was her pet, and Burke was her, affable himbo, and Fern was actually basically her teacher's assistant from the college that she used to work at,
Okay.
who became kind of her uh, uh, detective sidekick. Anyway, that book died, but all the characters got saved in one form or another. But I
Nice.
still wanted to write a mystery. I just turned out that I didn't really like mysteries very much, which is why I couldn't write a mystery. But then I was watching Poker Face. I was watching Poker Face, and if you have not seen Poker Face, it's like Natasha Lyonne, and it's basically, um, oh my God, the mystery just doesn't matter,
Yeah.
because you know who did it within the first 5 minutes. So it's
Yeah.
really about watching Natasha Lyonne bumble around with her, cigarette smoker's voice and figure out the mystery. But you already know what happened. So it's not about tricking you or the clever reveal. It's about watching her solve it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that turned on a light for me. It was like, I don't actually need to care about the mystery. I just need the weird people that I care about.
Yeah.
So Zill was Zill was a character that's been kicking around. I had this goblin character I wanted to do something with. She was also a main character in one of the destroyed drafts for book 2.
Uh-huh.
She was the necromancer, and she ended up opening up a bookshop, and it was a whole other story that just didn't, it got about, I don't know, 20,000 words and trashed.
Just didn't
So I
matter.
rescued her as well, and she has altered her personality over time and become who she is now. So the whole point of Goblins and Greatcoats, if you haven't read it, is that Zill is basically a chaos goblin who kind of sweeps in and solves a mystery, but nobody's really sure if she did it on purpose.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially it.
And that's hard to extend to a whole book, but it works great for a short.
Yeah, it was
Um,
perfect. It was a really lovely and fantastic short story. I've read it several times.
It was. Yeah.
and all of the potential suspects are basically clue characters. They're all named after colors and
colors and yeah. Uh-huh.
I love that. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's Clue 19.
it is an amazing movie.
Fantastic.
Tim Curry.
Yeah. I am so excited about this Marked edition. You've got
it's
some really nice
gorgeous.
special editions. It's beautiful.
It's really gorgeous. Really gorgeous.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate in having cool editions of these books and in translated editions. I got the little Japanese version, and it's so cute.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's about yay big.
Oh my gosh,
they're
it's just a little guy.
It's really tiny. Yeah, it's really wild.
Do you know how many languages it's been translated into?
20 something.
That's so
low
cool.
20.
It's making its way around the world.
That's
It's really neat.
Awesome.
It's neat to see art that comes from other countries and just
yes.
And some of alliteration is obviously a big problem.
Oh, of course.
I've just got an alliterative title and trying to come up with alliterative titles in other languages where that doesn't necessarily work, or character names where it doesn't necessarily work. So like thimble, in in French, thimble is not a particularly cute name. And the whole point is supposed to be a cute noun of an everyday object.
Yeah.
So he has to be named Button in French because
But
Bouton is actually a cute
Oh,
sounding little name. Can't
yeah.
be thimble because it's something it's like 2 word. Anyway, it doesn't work. I don't know in
Yeah.
French. I can't tell you. I can't remember what it is, but
I like
interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's really, I kind of wonder how that kind of thing gets preserved. I never have thought like if someone was named after a noun that you would have to maybe translate
you
that.
would have
Well,
to.
and then Galina is actually like it's a hen in Spanish.
Mhm.
But she's not named after a hen. That just happens to be her name. So you need to I think we removed an L.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Oh my God.
That's really, really neat.
So
Super
interesting.
interesting. How often, I'm circling back just a little bit, but I thought this was interesting. How often do you end up bringing new life to like characters and concepts that end up on the cutting room floor at some point? Like, do
I
those
try and use them all. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
try and use them all. And I find I have kind of a rule for myself is that any character in the book should be able to, theoretically, if they've got a name and they talk, they should be able to sustain their own book. They should be able to be a main character of their own story.
I
Mhm.
love that.
And if they aren't, then I should combine them with another character or remove them
Mhm.
because who cares? Why are they there?
Right.
Um, and that's a lot easier if you have a bunch of cutting room floor characters that you already know. And so you're looking for the one that fits. And sometimes it's like an interesting fit. Oh, wow. They could go here. And that presents some other unique opportunity. Or maybe that's a really interesting mix with the people around them. Because I think for the most part, your characters, it's like the alchemy of the people in the room.
Yeah.
Am I interested in these people being near each other and talking?
Hmm.
Do I
Definitely.
care? Are they distinct enough? Are they interesting enough? Do their perspectives mesh together in an interesting way? And so having a bunch of cutting room floor characters it's not you just try on the pieces like, oh, would you work here? Would you work here? Oh, no, actually, this is really cool. I'll add you. And maybe you change them up a bit, but you have a lot of raw material already there to work with.
Yeah. I love that. That is such a like
That's amazing.
cool way to like
There's something I can't remember where I read this. It was like use all your good ideas right now. If you have the tendency to say, "Oh, I have all these good ideas. I'll save it for just the
Don't
right
save
moment."
it. Use it.
yeah.
And it's like playing a game when you've got like healing potions or something, and you just keep them
Yeah.
all, and you
Yeah,
never
like
use
pull it
them,
out
and you
either
just
way.
save scum your way to the end of the game. And you get to the end of the game, and you've got like a million potions you never used.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I have the tendency to do that, so I'm trying not to do that when I write. If you have a good idea and it fits in this book, yes, it can go in this book. There's another idea out there. Don't save it.
Don't save it.
I
Yeah.
like that.
Don't.
The muse comes to you more as you use more, I think.
Yeah.
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 Well, and it's freeing. It's like, I can just use whatever's available. I don't have to add these artificial restrictions on myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. How is it different, like writing? I mean, now that you're writing, presumably like on deadline with a team, publicists, the kind of whole like trad pub rigmarole. How like is there anything you miss about being kind of the architect of your full process? Is there anything that's like kind of freeing about doing it in a different way?
I mean, they are very good about process. So I really like working with Tor.
Mhm.
So my process is actually pretty much unchanged. The only difference is that I'm letting people know what I'm doing, and I do ostensibly have deadlines.
Mhm.
They're pretty flexible about those, though, which I
Yeah.
don't know, you may have noticed given other books that were theoretically going to come out and then haven't for years and years and years and years. Um, I'm not going to do that, but they are flexible.
Yeah.
Um, I still write on my own. I'm because I feel it's useful, I give them my outline. I let them know what I'm doing, obviously. I make sure that they're okay with it, but they're not saying, well, maybe if you did a little bit of this or a little bit of that. Um, I still use my independent editor first before I even give them a draft. So I write the book. I have my indie editor go through it. We go through it together. Then I give them the book.
Oh, nice.
Um, my editor's Lindsay Hall at Tor US. She got a Hugo for being best editor last year. Lindsay's really amazing. I
Ah,
really love Lindsay.
congratulations.
And she's very great to work with.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I don't feel restrained really. There's a lot of just stuff, yeah, interviews, book stuff,
Yeah.
travel. The stuff is cool, but it is also like a job and it's time consuming in a way that it wasn't before. The
Yeah.
biggest change is just that anybody knows that you exist at all and you're writing for anybody else's expectations. And that's a lot bigger difference than anything to do with working trad, at least for me.
Yeah.
And it certainly was on the second book. Is anybody gonna like this? Now somebody cares what I write. Oh crud. This is stressful and makes me feel gross. That's much scarier.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was afraid she was going to knock over her equipment.
Hello.
This is Luna. This is the menace herself. I was like, if the computer goes crash and the power goes off,
That would
just
be
gonna cut this area pretty short.
an inauspicious and sudden ending, courtesy of the fanciest lady in
Oh my gosh.
town.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. Well, yeah, we just wanted to thank you again because I just feel like, like a lot of people, Legends and Lattes and Bookshops and Bone Dust, like we don't see everything that goes into it. We just end up with this beautiful finished product. We don't
Mhm.
see all the blood, sweat, and tears and doubt and stress. We just get to enjoy the parts of it that bring us comfort. And, I like genuinely, I think so. I found out about Legends and Lattes when it was still self-published. Another
Mhm.
bookseller friend was my friend Kel was incredibly passionate. You have to read this, you have to read this. And, I picked it up. I absolutely loved it. And, I think that Legends and Lattes, like really people, really connected with it. We love the world, we love the characters, we love your style. I think you've spent so long immersed in, games and books and making audiobooks that it's just, I feel like you have a really unique perspective on so many aspects of storytelling. Like you care about the art, you care about the characters, you just have you bring such a rich perspective to the table, and I think that
Well, that's really kind of you to say. I think everybody's got that perspective to bring to the book. It's just
yeah,
whether how it works out, maybe. I don't know. Um,
absolutely.
what you feel hesitant about doing, what you feel sure about doing.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of it feels like about like surety, just being clear about what you want or
Hmm.
what you think is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, I think I'm trying to reflect back and think about old me and what I would have been clear on and not clear on. And I would not have been clear on a lot of the things that I think were important, mostly about how I write and what I write about.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, because you get really clouded with what you think you should be doing to please other people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, when you don't even know what would please you.
No.
And
Yeah.
learning what would actually please you is actually relatively involved. I think audiobooks for me were a really, it's like an annealing fire. It lets you really clarify what's important to you
Yeah.
because you have to pay attention to it in a way that you don't otherwise.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, so it made clear to me what was important to me, which is characters have to be interesting. They cannot be mirrors for the main character. They their dynamic and their dialogue is important. Redundancy is death. Um, and even really great art characters that say the same thing 10 times in a row in interesting ways because maybe that's how a normal conversation goes. That doesn't work for me. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I feel I value my time now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
What's your favorite coffee drink?
Probably what I had this morning, a mezzo mezzo, which is like a little bit of raw sugar,
Yeah.
and what amounts to an Americano, an extra shot of espresso, and a little bit of steamed milk. So
Oh,
it's not as overbearing as a latte. It's just got a little bit of sweetness to it without adding like a syrup,
Yeah.
and it's still got two shots.
ideal. That has all the good stuff in it.
Exactly, all the good stuff.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think that was all the questions that we had. So yeah.
We're really grateful for your time.
Yeah, for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to see you both again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll see you around. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Good
Have a
luck with
fabulous
the audio.
morning. Thanks.